We've had an excellent set of sessions this morning, and I suppose we started today hearing about the challenges and opportunities that the meat and dairy sector are facing over the coming years, and indeed Brexit has been mentioned more than once, and that's an immediate issue, but we're more concerned, I suppose, in many respects with the longer-term issues that are arising, and particularly recognising the environmental and health narratives that have led to a key focus on meat and dairy. And I suppose Eat Lancet has been one of those things that has drawn further attention to these particular sectors with their suggestions that we should have more plant-based diets. I suppose much of our discussion this morning has brought us to start to think really about the consumer as well and where they sit in all of this narrative. We heard about shared responsibility being one of the definitions that Tara highlighted in her presentation, and shared responsibility from a consumption perspective, and that brings us right back to the consumer. So that's what's interesting about our panel this afternoon. We are thinking about it and looking through the lens of a consumer. And we're very lucky to have two very interesting people on our panel this afternoon. And we're going to start with Annaline Padeachi. And you can read her profile on the brochure, which is great. But I think it is worth mentioning that she sets herself apart as a scientist with her huge expertise in the nutritional science area, but also with this very keen understanding of motivational behaviors and a focus on commercial opportunities for blue sky research, which drives innovation in the industry and fosters good communication. And that's key, good communication. So I'm going to speak no longer because time is short, and Annaline has lots to share with us. So to start, we're just going to invite Annaline to speak to us for about 30 minutes, I think Annaline has said, and then we will open up the discussion, and I will introduce Tiffany, our other panel member, at that point. Cool. Thank you, Annaline.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a really cool opportunity to be here in Ireland, so thank you to the organisers for bringing me all the way out here. I've never been to Ireland, I've never been interested in Europe, and here I am, and it's not been a place on my bucket list, but it's definitely made it to my list of where I want to come back to again. This is a really interesting country, so we're going to go on a bit of a journey with Ireland. Ironically, however, you hear heaps about Kerry's. My very first job out of uni was with Kerry Ingredients. Go figure. So I guess that's a little bit of a tie to Ireland. So today, what am I going to do? I'm going to talk about the evolution of animal proteins, and I'm going to use dairy as a case study. So we've heard heaps about consumers, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who use the product. So it's really important to understand who these guys are and what's their motivations, yeah? So this car up the top, this is a Porsche Taycan, and this one is a Toyota Corolla. Now you get to choose Porsche Taycan, Toyota Corolla. Show of hands. If you're a Porsche Taycan person, if that's what you think you are, put your hand up. All right, and if you're a Toyota Corolla, put your hand up. All right, that's interesting. I'm not going to probe as to why you think you're a Corolla or a Taycan, but that's cool. All right. Porsche versus Toyota. I actually think you guys are the Porsche. All right? I actually think what you do, dairy and red meat, but definitely dairy, you're definitely a Porsche, and here's the reason why. This guy over here, Ferdinand Porsche, he created the first electric car way back in 1901. And that's the one that he's sitting in right over there. It was shown off at the Paris Science Fair. 1901, first electric car, twin engine. He created it. But it wasn't until 2019 that Porsche has come out with their electric car, which is the white one that I just showed you. He left, he did his car, he joined Mercedes, he joined Daimler, and he started working for those guys, producing cars, designing cars for them, but they were very much so fixated on really low profit margin and pushing out as many cars through the door. They were not fixated on quality. They just wanted quantity. And that wasn't exactly Porsche's style. His style was all about quality. So he wanted to give his end user a really good driving experience. He wanted them to enjoy the luxury feel, the smoothness. Look at that car. I mean, it looks almost a bit like a Rolls Royce, right? So this is the first commercial Porsche that was for sale in 1931 that he did all on his own. Pulled away from those guys and did this with them, with himself. And Porsche's evolved over the years to maintain that brand. So when you drive a Porsche, you're driving luxury, you're driving speed, you're driving a leather seat, you're driving a sensation, you are driving an experience. That was what his motivation was. Enter Toyota. So Porsche comes into the modern world and they've got this amazing cars, amazing brand reputation. You buy a Porsche, that's what you're doing. If you're doing 20 Ks, you are still, it doesn't really matter. You feel like you're doing 200 because everybody's looking at you. Really, that's the idea of a Porsche. Porsche went to Toyota in 1996 and they were like, Toyota, you guys are the champions of pushing out cheap cars. We are the champions of pushing out high quality cars and our sales are going down. Teach us what you do best. And Toyota have a thing called lean line manufacture. So they entered a special agreement with Porsche to teach them all about lean line manufacture. So cutting down their processes, still producing a good vehicle, but in a more efficient way. So Porsche learned lean line manufacture from Toyota, 1996. You'd never really think that Porsche should go to Toyota and learn, yeah? They also learned about hybrid technology. And Toyota is a champion at putting out hybrid cars. They've been doing it for a while. Think Prius, yeah? So this Taycan is based on Toyota's hybrid technology combined with Porsche's engineering expertise. A Toyota, I had a look at it, Toyota Corolla sells for about 25,000 euros in Ireland. This Taycan will be launched in 2020. I don't know why you guys are behind. Like, Germany's just over there. We've already got it in Australia, but you're getting it next year. Go figure. Car miles. It'll be launched next year in Ireland for about 160,000 euros. It's a lot cheaper than your usual Porsche, but it's still up there in that premium, expensive market. So they've adjusted themselves because they know that consumers, drivers, want to be lean, green, contributing to less greenhouse gas emissions, feeling good about themselves, but they don't want to give up their brand perception. They don't want to give up that luxury. So this is Porsche's option. So you guys have a really high-value product, and it's called milk. And it is a Porsche in terms of its nutritional value. But it's really interesting how being operationally efficient has made it almost like a Toyota in terms of a commodity product. So what's really important is always take a step back and always think, what is your value proposition? So who's that end user? We've just heard the Porsche story. They're modifying themselves to suit the end user in today's world. What's your value proposition? And the key thing is whoever uses you determines your value. It's not what I think. It's what you guys think about me determines my value. Whoever uses you determines your value. And quite often we focus on value, what we think is perceived value. We focus on ourselves and what we think we're offering. But it's really important to take one step backwards and see who is it that uses us, yeah? So let's have a look at milk in a historical perspective. Here's milk. Cows started way back a long time ago. Roughly about 10,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, that was like the dairy capital of the world. Those guys learned how to drink milk. They learned how to process milk, making, fermented products, so it had a lower level of lactose so that adults can consume it. They moved up from the Middle East, they went into the Balkan regions, and here's where we started having a problem because babies could have milk because they've got more lactase, that enzyme, to break down lactose, but adults couldn't, so they were getting super sick. This piece of fragment up here was found in the 1970s in Poland, and it dates back to about 6,000 years ago. What's interesting is it's got these little holes, and so the archaeologist, he was like, what's the deal with these holes? He sent it away for analysis, and on one side of it, they found milk fat molecules. And so based on that, they've worked out that this was one of the first implements used to create yogurt and curds. So these guys, 6,000 years ago, up in the Balkans, worked out that if we put milk into these clay pots with holes in it and we can ferment it, we can actually produce a product that adults can eat that's high in energy, high in nutritional value, and is not going to give us the runs because they didn't have toilet paper back then. So that's how dairy started getting into Caucasian culture, yeah? Way back then. Eventually, it becomes a staple. Everyone's got it in their backyard. There's a cow pretty much for everybody. The Industrial Revolution takes place. We've got infant formula that was developed in 1903 in response to babies drinking contaminated cow's milk. And so things are changing. Enter Abraham Lincoln. So Abe Lincoln, most people don't realize this, his mom died of milk poisoning when he was a child. And when he became president, one of the first things that he said was, doctors, scientists, I want you guys to work out what is it about milk that makes people die. And so they did. They went off, they worked it out that the cows were eating a particular type of weed that had a toxin in it. And it didn't kill the cow, but it accumulated in their milk. So when women who were pregnant, immunocompromised, the elderly or children drank it, they died. So they worked that out. They put the cows over here, the weeds over in a different paddock, and everybody lived happily ever after. Yeah? Enter the next phase. We come into the war, or wars, all sorts of wars. We've got homogenization taking place, pasteurization, canning, all in response to changes in our society. And we come through the war, and now we've got a bit more money. The baby boomers are, well, their parents are booming. That's why they are here. And they're off to school, and they're having milk in school because they realize milk is such a nutritious product. People are going on dates, and they're drinking milkshakes. Instead of going to a fancy restaurant, they go on a date and drink a milkshake. Because milk had a really high value proposition. A nutritional product, but also a treat product. To a very different concept to what milk is today. But what is milk today? Well, it's pretty much in everything. This is just food. This is where milk goes. So who's the farmer who has cows? Okay, this is where your milk goes, into all of these different food products. But not just into that. It's into infant formula, it's into pastries, it's into cosmetics, it's into makeup. Like I've got 15 different things on my face right now. And they actually do have, I think most of them actually have milk-derived ingredients in it. So if your cows died tomorrow, forget about eating. My face wouldn't look like this. And that's like for what, 56% of the world? We're women, we wear makeup. And your milk goes into that. Huge value proposition. Thing is, who exactly are you? So if you don't know who your end user is, and you don't know who you are, then we're going to have a bit of a breakdown here, right? So who are we? So I'm from Australia, so I've had to do my homework and work out who you guys are in Ireland. Flying in on Tuesday, got into Dublin, and I was like, what the hell? Where am I? Like, there's no high-rises here. What? There's no, tall buildings? How is this a city? Everything's so old-looking, beautiful, but it's like, wow, cultural difference. 50% of the Irish population are men and 50% are women. And you guys have a really fascinating history. I found this really interesting. 4,000 years ago, they found some farms. You were part of the Bronze Age. This country was affected by the winter volcano in 536 AD, which was the worst day to be alive in all-time history. You were hit down with yellow plague in 660, and then you had the Vikings turn up and try and kill you all, and then the King of England turned up and he tried to rule you all. And somehow or the other, you survived all that on your potatoes, and then they died, and you're still here. You just can't get rid of the Irish. They're in every single continent, and you guys are still going, and you're still going. And you have this happy-go-lucky nature because you just don't seem to be dying either. This is 2018, your latest health statistics. You're an aging population, and you're just staying alive for a lot longer. Must be those potatoes. I haven't worked it out just yet. And your perception of your health is interesting. So the Irish population was surveyed in 2016, and your perception of your health is that you are like gunning it, leading the pack in Europe. You guys are, you think you're the healthiest country in Europe. The reality on the other side is a little bit different. The reality on the other side is that if everybody from here onwards, if you guys all stand up, all you stand up. All you stand up, and this table over here with two gentlemen, stand up. All right, so you're roughly about 54% of the Irish population. And if this were the whole country of Ireland, all of you people have got hypertension, which is a huge risk factor for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, things to go wrong with your renal processing system. Y'all all got that. 54%. You're just underneath Finland. They're coming up 56%. Number one, you guys are 54% for men, 50% for women. And then if everybody sits down except for this row and this row here, behind Kathleen. Yeah, you guys just stay up. Just these two rows. Everybody look at them. So you're like about 1/5 of the population in this room. You represent the population of Ireland that have got a chronic health condition. So you either are dying with cancer, you've got a heart attack, you've had a stint, you may actually have cardiovascular disease or diabetes, at least one of those. Okay, so you guys think you're super healthy. The reality, not so much. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Great props. All right? So that's your health. This is who you are. Remember that. You're consumers. You may be farmers, you may be processors, but you eat food just like everybody else out there. So this is who you are. Who will you be, though, in 5 or 10 years' time? All right. Number one. So we've heard about Gen X, the millennials. I'm a millennial. I know we get a bad rap, but I'm not such a bad person. The millennials at the moment, the millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, so, those people who are about 27 all the way to about 47, currently represent 45% of the Irish population in 2016, okay? By 2026, that age group will be representing, so those guys are moving forward in time, they'll be representing about 43%. They haven't changed a whole lot. But here's what does change. All right, who is over the age of 65? Put your hand up. And you're over the age of 60. If you're over the age of 65, please stand up. All right. You guys are actually called not just baby boomers, but you're the golden age. So kudos to you. You are the golden oldies. That's a real term. All right. Just have a look at how many golden oldies we have. Sorry, keep standing. We don't really have a whole lot of you. You're like less than 10% here. Okay, so we've got the golden oldies. And currently, you represent 28% of the Irish population right now. Okay? But in 2026, you're only going to be, and that's including the baby boomers as well, right? In 2026, you can sit down, you're only going to be 20% of the population. 20% of you guys are going to be around. 43% of me is going to be around. And the rest of us are going to be babies who are born. Seamus, you've got a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 9-year-old, 11-year-old. They are going to be making up the rest of the population. So your kids are going to be buying food, selling food, or working in the food industry. Just think about that. They're the next gen. And they're going to be doing this in the next 10 to 15 years. That's really who you're marketing and you're creating products for. Yeah? The other thing to think about is we live in a global world. We live, like you guys here in Ireland, I'm all the way down in Australia, but at the end of the day, people move around. It just took me 24 hours to get here, and it takes, well, that's because I'm right down the end. But for other people, it's a lot easier to travel around. Now, when you think about migrant populations, Ireland's interesting. About 92% of the Irish population are either Irish or Caucasian, yeah? So you're about 80% actual Irish, and the rest of you are Caucasian. All right? Outside of that, you've got the rest of that is migrants. So about 2% are African migrants, about 2% are migrants from Asia, 1.5% are migrants from India, and the rest of them are unclassified. What does that mean to you? Well, when we look at the world, these particular regions, so you guys are up there in the blue section, parts of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, they have the lowest lactose intolerance in the world, genetically. Okay? The lowest level is about 5% in Australia, up to 17% in Finland. Lowest level of genetic lactose intolerance. When we look at parts of Africa and parts of South America, we're getting up to about 30 to 50% lactose intolerance, depending on which country we're talking about. And then when we get into Asia, it can be anywhere between 50 to 90%, depending on which country you're going into. Now, if you think about different people moving around, floating around, and migrating around, you're getting different cohorts who genetically just can't have dairy with lactose in it. It's just it. It's just it for them. Unless we do lactose intolerant or lactose-free products, yeah? So if you've got people like that coming over here, or you're playing in other countries like in China and places like that, you got to really think about what they can or cannot do, what is culturally relevant to them, what they've been brought up on. So that's what they're going to be open to. So that's who you're dealing with. That's who you guys are. That's what you're playing with. So we understand our consumers. What are we offering? What are we putting out there at the moment? So, in terms of nutrition, when we compare full cream milk with the nut milks out there, unless it is properly supplemented, so if you listen to that radio program I had, I've got a bit of flack about it, but it's the truth. Unless a nut milk is supplemented, it's chalk and cheese. Okay, we're talking about colored water versus a whole food. Full cream milk does have a lot more energy in it comparatively, because you derive energy from protein, you derive energy from fat, you also derive a bit of energy from lactose. But here's the thing, full cream cow's milk, it's 96% fat-free. And that always gives me the gripes when people are like, oh, I can't have full cream milk because it's high in fat. Like, are you serious? That profiterole had way more fat than 2 liters of milk in it at lunchtime. So full cream milk, only 4% fat, but yes, that does contribute to its total energy. The others are a lot less, because you're talking about like 3% almonds in almond milk. Coconut milk is actually quite watered down. They add about 85% water to coconut cream to make coconut milk. So they're mainly water-based products. When we look at it in terms of nutrients, so this is where this becomes really interesting, because we look at nutrition information panels and they have got calcium, yeah, if it's on the label, you've got your protein, you've got your energy, you've got your carbohydrates, your different types of fats, sometimes some minerals, and your nut milks, or your alternatives, they don't really have a whole lot going for them. Think about it, 97% water, 3% almonds. There's not a lot of anything in that. So they have to supplement. Now, I'm not against nut milks. I drink nut milk 6 days of the week, every single morning in my smoothie with avocado, spinach, and some banana, because it tastes so good. And I do put some protein powder in it. But when I do it with dairy milk, it just doesn't taste the same. You know, just dairy and spinach just don't go. I don't care where you are in the world, it just doesn't go. But almond milk, it does. It tastes nice. And so that's why I do it. But if the product is not actually supplemented properly, then we're talking about chalk and cheese. Now, I'm going to hand out some samples, and you guys are going to help me with this. So, Amy, you get that one over there. Thank you. Seamus, you get the second one. And Andrew, you get the last one. Thank you. Right. And I will get back to what I'm doing with this a little bit later on, so I've saved you, Tiffany. Unless these milks are adequately supplemented, they aren't the same. So you can have a look at that, right? So these are different milks up there. And you can see, like say, for example, if we look at just, say, potassium, full cream cow's milk is blue, soy milk is orange. That's been supplemented with potassium. But then look at the almond milk and look at the rice milk. And well, coconut milk's not even on there. Completely different. So it depends on whether a company will actually supplement that product or not. Whereas milk naturally comes with it. The other guys, if they do supplement it, they make that claim to fame. They put it on their NIP. Milk doesn't, even though it's naturally there. Usability. So that's all I'm going to do when it comes to nutrition. Key thing is, whole milk has got a lot of good stuff in it. The other guys have to supplement. And if they supplement, it's comparative. But if they don't, it's not. Now, I did this survey in Australia, and I did a survey on the train the other day coming from Dublin to Cork. And the guys in the cabin were stuck with me, so too bad, how sad. So I just went around asking people random questions. And I kind of got the same sort of perspective from Irish as I have from Australia. What's milk? Well, by definition, it is a fluid that is produced in the mammary glands of a mammal. So whether you're a camel, a human, or a cow, and you produce milk, that's milk. And these are the main types that are for human consumption commercially available. When you ask consumers, what do you think about dairy milk? What's the use for it? This is the key thing that comes up. So tea, coffee, it's used in ice cream or cheese. A lot is used in breakfast cereal, baby formula, or as an ingredient in cake, things like that. If you ask me about the characteristics, it's normal, it's real, it's proper, it's tasty. Provenance and process, to be honest, this doesn't come up very often. But those who do, yeah, they do think about farmers, hard work, a natural product, the udder of a cow, but not many people do. And the ones who do are those who have a tie to a farm or a farmer. So if you don't have a tie to a farm or a farmer, you're not thinking that. The majority of people, whether you're tied to a farmer or not, when they think of dairy milk, this comes up constantly. Snotty nose, sinuses, an upset tummy, feeling bloated, feeling uncomfortable, getting the runs. That comes up all the time. And the main people who use it are babies, small children, and when I went to school. So your value proposition is extremely not cheap. Cheap, an everyday product, devalued. In Australia, they think of retailers as being thieves and the farmers are doing a tough deal, but it's a cheap product. It's an everyday product. When we ask people what do they think about nut milks, well, firstly, that's your definition of milk, remember. Here is nut milks, and the value of nut milks is going up. So the approximate global value at the moment is about 14 billion in 2018. But, you know, the trajectory of growth, if it's already been 15% for 5 years and it's set to do another 15% in 5 years, the global value of this industry is growing. Here are all the different varieties. You could literally have a different nut milk every single day of a month, 28 days, and then you start the whole process again. When you ask consumers what do they think, who uses nut milk? Very specific. Okay, yeah, we've got the vegos, the vegans, the non-animals, but these were really interesting. CrossFitters, the in-kids, and this comes up a lot, even on the train. Even the taxi drivers in Ireland, they've said this as well. My wife, my daughter, my girlfriend. So women are the key users here. And it seems to be that their spouse or their partner seems to know that and buys it for them, interestingly enough. What do you think about it in terms of Is it a real milk? Some people think it's clever marketing. They think of TV because it's highly promoted on TV. You always see it with a blender or a smoothie or something like that. It is very processed. It's not as natural as real milk, which is quite true. But when we talk about health, this is the first thing that comes up, specific users and health. So when you think about nut milk, what first comes to mind? Healthy fats. Healthy fats. Plants are healthier. Why are plants healthier? Well, they've got to be healthier. Like, plants are always healthier, aren't they? Gluten-free, that one always confuses me why people think of almond milk and gluten-free, but they do. They think of protein, bulking, sports nutrition, specific nutrition with specific nutrients, and a healthy tummy. So there's a really high health value proposition drinking nut milks based on consumers. Where do they use it? In all sorts of different food products. The blender, spinach, green smoothies, so that's definitely me, and tofu. And its value proposition, lots of variety, lots of variety. I can have a nutty taste. Some people thought it was a chalk mouthfeel. I can drink it plain because it's naturally flavored, whereas dairy milk's just milk, whereas I can have a different flavor of milk in the nuts. It's not actually an alternative to milk. It's just a different experience. It's just a different experience. So in Australia, 3% of the population are considered vegans, and the statistics is roughly about the same here in Ireland. So it's not a huge population that are vegan. Majority of people are actually flexitarians. So they want to have other different components in their diet. If you think about your fruit bowl at home, you don't just have apples. You probably got apples, oranges, bananas, plums, and kiwi fruit. Same sort of deal here. I don't want to just have milk, milk, milk. I want to have milk. I want to experience almonds. I want to drink a pistachio because chewing is too hard. It's a different experience, yeah? So this is consumers. What exactly are you guys producing? Why do I think you are a Porsche? Now, from my side, as a nutrition research scientist, this is what I look at. How do nutrients go through the digestive tract? How does processing affect that? And what impact do we have on health? Because I would prefer us not to get sick and not to take medication and live a better life. So in terms of nutrition, we all know calcium, strong bones. That's a tale as old as 10,000 years. What actually does dairy do? Key thing, we eat food, not individual nutrients. So the other products have to add nutrients into it. Dairy naturally has those components in it. We don't eat a plate full of pills, we eat whole foods that are composed of nutrients. But these nutrients can have a big impact on the body. Now, just remember, in Ireland, you guys aren't dying quickly. You're staying alive for a lot longer. You are an aging population. This particular condition is called sarcopenia. And it is a condition that every single one of us in this room will experience in our lifetime. Guaranteed. Unless you are like a bodybuilder or something like that. But we will all experience this at some stage in our life. It starts off younger for some, starts off later for others. And basically this older man here, he has got sarcopenia, where his muscle has wasted away. So here's a healthy arm, healthy muscle. You can see the size of the muscle. And over time, as we get older and we don't do as much physical exercise, we're not actually using those muscles, we're not doing weight training, that muscle shrinks. And that's what sarcopenia is. Muscle wastage away. And so when that happens, you lose strength, you lose the ability to be independent. Even opening jars is difficult. Opening a packet of cheese is difficult. So it is a problem, and it is associated with aging, and you just can't outrun it. But you can prevent it for as long as possible. Now, in the USA, the healthcare costs in 2000, I couldn't find the latest data, but in 2000, the healthcare costs associated with looking after a person with sarcopenia, either having a carer at home, the cost of putting them into aged care facility, was US dollars 18.4 billion. In the UK, in 2018, the associated costs with in-house home care for people with sarcopenia was 2.85 billion pounds. I'm not really sure, I couldn't find the data for Ireland. But you can see it costs a lot to look after aging. In Australia, the cost associated with looking after a person with sarcopenia is 3 times the cost of looking after a person who doesn't have sarcopenia. So if a person has got the exact same health, they've just got, and it costs them $20,000 to look after them per year, add sarcopenia to that mix, it's going to cost them $60,000 to look after that individual, all right? Here is where dairy comes in. So this study, and there's quite a few studies on this, on how dairy protein affects, prevents muscle breakdown, muscle wastage, not just in athletes, not just in babies, but in the elderly. It's really important. So in this particular study, 20 grams of casein was put into a serve of dairy milk. So just plain old milk, they put some casein powder into it, mix it up. This is young people under the age of 20, and this is elderly, I think they were like teenagers to about the age of 20, and then the elderly that were over the age of 75 who had sarcopenia. And so what they found is this is the amount of protein in their muscle before and afterwards. And the gray is after they've consumed it. So they consumed the glass of milk with 20 grams of casein, and you can see in the young person a lot of protein. The increase in protein into their muscle is almost, not quite, but nearly double. In the elderly, there has been an increase. Now, in a young person, you expect that because they're moving, they're active, their muscles are active. We're talking about people who are in an old age home, who are bedbound, who are not moving. And what we found, well, what the researchers found, is that 50% of the protein was directly absorbed in the elderly, and 11% went straight into their muscles. So if they had started having higher content of dairy protein in their diet at an earlier age, this study, and quite a few of them show it, that you can actually slow down the progression of sarcopenia. Because muscle builds by actually doing weight training, resistance training type exercise. These guys are not actually able to do that, and yet they can absorb protein in the form of dairy protein more so than meat protein. So dairy protein is really quite an amazing thing. This is just dairy protein. I'm not talking about anything else about dairy today. So you can see from that perspective, preventing sarcopenia is huge, or slowing down that process is huge. There are people in this room right now who have got sarcopenia. It's just undiagnosed. And this dairy milk has the potential to actually slow that process down. Think about it in terms of how much money you can save in preventative health. And whoever is actually producing milk, who are the farmers, who are the processors, you guys are not just farmers and processors. You are directly involved in preventative health. You're on the same playing field as me as a nutrition researcher. So, what should the next profit offering be? So we've seen where we've come from. We see what we look like. We see what we're going to look like. You're seeing what you actually have in your cow, in that udder. So what should the next thing be? Now, I have not come up with this term, functional thirst quenchers. It's actually a real terminology that's used in NPD. It is the fastest growing sector in new product development globally. So when I'm talking about a functional thirst quencher, I'm talking about something that I can drink that quenches my thirst, but has additional properties than just quenching my thirst. So that bottle of water is just water. But if I add electrolytes to that, now I've got something that quenches my thirst, but will also prevent me from being dehydrated. If I add some collagen to that water, something that will prevent me from being thirsty, but also reverse the 7 signs of aging and prevent me from looking older because I've added collagen to it. A functional thirst quencher. Bone broth is a great example of that. They've taken bones, boiled it for 8 hours in a pot, put it into a little bottle, and they say like, wow, this is super cool. Drink it in a coffee cup and you won't get, what won't you get? You won't get sarcopenia, that's one of them, and you can also reverse aging because of collagen content. Functional thirst quencher. Now have a look at this. I went to a Marks and Spence shop over here, but I haven't been able to get the photos off my phone just yet. This, and I mean, similar. You guys will, I mean, these are Australian brands, but you're going to see it's similar sort of concept to what's here in Ireland. Milk. All right, let's just look at full cream milk. What do we have? We've got milk, full cream goodness, because everybody loves cream. Everyone's afraid of full cream milk. Gosh, I really should do marketing for Paul's, hey. Skim milk, trim, all right? This is it. Only 2% fat. Here's our nuts, or our alternates. So here we've got the same sort of alternates in the refrigerator section. We've got an almond milk here that's carrageenan free. I don't know what carrageenan is, but whatever it is, it's free, and I'm going for free. It's a good source of calcium. It's gluten-free. It's soy-free. It's dairy-free. It's unsweetened. It's no added sugar. Wow. If I've got diabetes, like, this is totally where I'm at. If I've got cardiovascular disease, I'm so totally there. Same thing with your coconut milk. Refreshing. A refreshing coconut beverage. It's also organic, it's unsweetened, it's gluten-free, it's GMO-free, and it's got nothing artificial. Even better. So these guys, you'll learn, right? Remember, you're the Porsche. Learn from Toyota. In terms of nutrition, this is Toyota pushing its luck. But they're really good at highlighting what they think they're good at doing. And here you've got an awesome product that has got a lot of great stuff going for it. And what do we have? Full cream goodness. No wonder it's associated with breakfast cereals, little kids, and cups of tea and coffee. Whereas this is definitely associated with your upper echelon, your higher market value, because it gives that value proposition. You see what I'm saying? Yeah? All right, so an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And you got to fight this. This is not even really hard. It's not easy, like, I'll be honest. Plants have got it always good going for them. There's nothing that you can pick on a plant at all. Apart from phytates and how it binds to iron, but really, it's everything is going for it. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. We know that. It's entrenched in our mindset. Whereas animals, a little bit different. You've got the ethics, you've got the sustainability, you've got all of that sort of stuff. So how do you communicate that to help consumers understand the story, help them to understand the information that's out there? Experiential functional drinking. I think that it's not just an apple. I really think that dairy can play in this space as well, because it does play in it. From the research, it definitely plays in it. It just needs to be communicated, highlighted. Companies need to see that value in the product and put it out there. It's not just about marketing spin, it's about having science behind your product. It can affect societal health. It has to have some clear functional benefits, functional in terms of my health, or my back pocket, or my lifestyle, convenience, provenance. Tell that story where our environmental responsibility, what we're doing for the environment, because it's actually amazing. I was out at Vital Milk yesterday hearing about how they're measuring greenhouse gas emission in cow burps, feeding them different types of food. That's really cool. And Ireland is doing that. There's only 20 of these machines in the world, and you've got 2 of them right here, and you're doing that. That is an amazing story to tell. You may not have the data right yet, but you can tell that. This is what we're doing to decrease greenhouse gas emissions. This is what we're doing to feed our cattle. Because you create an emotional connection. So the people who have got a product, could you please have a drink? Taste it and tell me what you think of it. Amy, what do you think of your little cup of whatever? Yeah? What do you think? What do you think you're drinking? You're drinking milk. Do you like the taste of it? Yeah? Mouthfeel? Good? All right. Seamus? Go for it. Seamus's face tells a great story. It's poker. And he's got a great smile. Be honest, not the Irish, like, I am so good at everything. Be honest. Do you like it? Okay, we're very politically correct. It's got a bite to it. Do you like the appearance of it? Do you enjoy it? Okay, drink it. Yep. All right. All right. And Andrew. Well, no? Do you like the appearance of it? And the texture, the flavor? What does it taste like? Yeah, so it's thin? Yeah. Yep. Yep. And you love the aftertaste. No, what does it taste like? Bitter, salty, sweet, meaty. So Amy's got full cream cow's milk. Oh, okay. Seamus is really neutral and he's agreeing with Andrew. Okay, well, Seamus, it's a. All right. Didn't. Not sure either. So you guys clearly haven't drunk this before. That's great. Amy's got full cream dairy milk. Seamus has got soy milk. And your face doesn't look like you didn't expect that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And then Andrew had almond milk. So you're probably going to go and have dairy milk again, Amy? Yeah. Would you buy it? You do buy it, right? Would you buy almond milk? No, not even going to go there. Seamus, you've been the most neutral, politically correct person. Would you buy almond milk? You've tasted the almond milk? Would you buy it? No. Would you buy soy milk? You would. Have you ever had that? Like, have you actually bought soy milk before? No, but now you've drunk it and you don't actually think it's too bad, you'd actually buy it again. Yeah, there you go. So this is a live experiment right here. Thank you. That's great. I didn't expect that result, but okay, we'll take it. We eat with our eyes. So you see something first, then you taste it, and you think with your stomach. So if you have a good experience with something, you're going to go back for it. If you have a bad experience with something, you're going to be risk averse, you're going to be afraid of it, you're going to back away from it, you are not going to go for the almond milk again. And most people have a great experience with dairy unless they're sick or they're lactose intolerant. And so they're going to enjoy that and they're going to go back for it because they're having an experience. It's just about changing its perception from just being a commodity, but being something that is a staple that is extremely high value and an enjoyable experience, yeah? Think about that. We eat with our eyes, but we think with our stomach. Which brings me on to my last slide. Toilet paper. Toilet paper is a fascinating thing to start and end with because it literally is the end of the line, but toilet paper is really interesting. Think about dairy has been around since about 10,000 BC, yeah? 6,000 years in the Balkans, so Europe, 6,000 years ago. So you're like the oldest food dairy product in the world. Maybe grains might be a bit older than you. Yeah, they're the Egyptians. So you guys are second oldest in the world. Toilet paper made its debut into the world in 1865. For a minute, just close your eyes, play pretend. You can all be part of the experiment now. Imagine a world without toilet paper. World without toilet paper, and you got the runs. Okay, some giggles. What does that world, you can open up your eyes now, what does that world look like? Mexico. Okay. Well, I'm taking toilet paper when I go to Mexico. What does it look like? Seriously, think about it. A world without toilet paper. You know, like carry packets of tissues in your back pocket. Like, can you imagine a world without toilet paper? Like, seriously, can you imagine a world without toilet paper? You can't. And it's only been invented in 1865. It's not that old. 1935 is when it came without splinters. World without splintered toilet paper. Wow. Toilet paper was actually created as a medical paper for people with hemorrhoids in hospital. So before that, I'm not sure what everybody else used, but that's what it was created for. It had a medical purpose, a really high value proposition to help these individuals who are in hospital in the USA to overcome their hemorrhoid problem while they were lying in hospital. And then it just became a bit more broader and hit mainstream, and everybody loved it. In 1935, it came without splinters, and it's just been growing ever since then. You can't imagine a world without toilet paper. Dairy is so much more valuable than than toilet paper, sorry. Dairy products are way more valuable than milk, than toilet paper. And yet, you know, right now there's a bit of a vibe. It's in Australia, it's over here, that like people are vegans, whoever it is, they're encroaching on our turf, and we're not going to have a life, we're not going to have an industry, we're going to be out of a job, no one's going to like our cows. It's the end of us. It's not. If toilet paper can survive, and you know, we've got 3-ply with silk in it, what do you guys have? Something that's way more valuable than toilet paper. It's just about understanding who your end user is right now. And your end user is the same person who uses that 3-ply toilet paper with silk in it. So if Kleenex can make it, so can you. Thank you very much. Hope you've taken something out of that. If you've got any questions afterwards, feel free to come see me and we'll have a chat.
Thank you very much. Can I be heard? Yeah. Thank you very much, Annalyn. That was very interesting. I'm going to give you a moment to take a breath, take a drink. We have about 15 minutes left. I don't see, I'm not too sure what that means. We have maybe 18 minutes left. Sorry, we have 15 minutes left. I was right. So what we want to do really is maybe first of all talk to Tiffany. I'll ask a few questions at the start, maybe for 10 minutes, and then we might open up to the audience for the last 5 minutes to ask a few further questions, burning questions that you might have. And Annalyn will answer any others individually afterwards, as will Tiffany. So Tiffany, it was a very interesting discussion we had here about the evolution of protein, and particularly looking at dairy products. And I suppose the message that I was hearing was other products have stolen the thunder of dairy in the more recent past, and in actual fact have leveraged the positive aspects of milk and transferred them into alternative drinks. Have you witnessed a similar story in the States, or how has it evolved in the space in the States, and how have companies involved in dairy looked at animal protein and dairy protein?
Well, we've definitely seen the same thing in the States, and it's interesting. It's not just in dairy, it's in meat products as well now. I think dairy usually starts a little earlier than meat products. We've seen kind of a shift from in the dairy industry. We have the no RBST, and then in the beef industry, we see, oh, well, we need hormone-free. Then we see these alternative milks come out, and now about 10 years later, we see these alternative proteins come out, or alternative meats. They're really not meats. But it seems that, we've witnessed the same thing in dairy, and beef usually follows. I think it's very interesting to observe that. And I'm with the North American, Meat Institute. So obviously red meat is a concern to us, and alternatives to red meat are concerning because we've seen everything happen in the dairy industry. And so, a lot of our companies are saying, okay, is the almond milk thing going to happen to beef? And that's a big issue that we're continuing to work on because with our regulatory scheme, it obviously didn't work out. It hasn't worked out well for milk so far, and the dairy industry is still fighting, even the use of the term milk at this point. So. Excuse me.
Yeah, so I suppose that's interesting because I suppose in many respects, as we look at consumer trends, we see and markets responding to that. We hear about shroom burgers, so that's the mushroom burger, or the cauliflower steak. So we're seeing words that are naturally associated positively with meat in that case,
Right.
being transferred across to alternatives. From a regulatory perspective, I suppose in the food sector, we were talking about those, or in the dairy and meat sector, we talk about those as fake foods in one sense, and it's kind of claims are protected and regulated. But what about the use of these terms? Like, what is happening in that space? What needs to be done in that space, and how does anything need to be done? And maybe Annalyn, you might answer that in the context of consumer perceptions, but I'll direct the question to you first, Tiffany.
Sure. From a regulatory standpoint, particularly in the United States, it's become quite a problem, actually. Our regulations state that, we have a definition of milk, and it's the one that Annalyn gave. We have a definition of meat in our regulations. It's not just in the Webster Dictionary, it is in our Code of Federal Regulations. We have a definition of, meat byproduct, meat product. We have standards of identity. So, a product has to meet these standards to be called ground beef or, certain other byproducts. And so that has really been, that's how we've named these products. However, we really haven't thought, as far in the meat industry, we really haven't thought about the improper use of those products until it happened with dairy. The difference between dairy and meat in the United States, anyway, is the agency that regulates the labeling. So, it's actually it's a regulation, but it's a law. It states that products can't be mislabeled in any detail, in any particular. You can't mislabel a product. You can't mislead a consumer. And so the dairy industry, again, has been fighting this because they are regulated by FDA. They have the same regulation as USDA. Meat is regulated by USDA. However, the enforcement of these label regulations is very different. FDA regulates plant-based product. They basically regulate food except for meat and poultry. USDA regulates meat and poultry. The difference in the labeling schemes is for meat and poultry, all labels have to be approved by the US government before they are put on the market. FDA does not do that. And that's really how a lot of these different milks came onto the market. They didn't have to go through a prior label approval process. And so they just put it out there. Now, these companies that are saying that, anything made out of almonds or soy, things like that, anything that's made like that is milk, technically they can be sued, but who really wants to take on, what are the brand names? I don't even know. Nobody wants to take on, that kind of lawsuit. Now, in the meat and poultry industry, it's different. Everything has to be prior approved by the USDA. So if you have a label claim like antibiotic-free, you have to show that you went through a process that guarantees that this product was produced in a manner where no antibiotics were used. I should say no antibiotics ever, not antibiotic-free. So that's really the difference. So we've really never had to worry about it, except now a lot of these alternative meats are made of plants. And so USDA doesn't actually regulate them because USDA regulates meat and poultry, that's it. FDA regulates the plant-based products, and they're doing the same thing as they did with milk. They're saying cauliflower steak. They're saying Beyond Burger. And honestly, it's going to take someone bringing a lawsuit to stop those label claims from happening. And I really don't think that a lawsuit will be sufficient with what we've seen with the dairy industry.
Annalyn, does it matter? Does it matter they're calling it steak? Does it matter they're calling it a cauliflower burger or Beyond Burgers?
I think, it's a lot to do with perception. When I've gone to vegan markets and I've asked them questions about like their cheese, it's not really cheese. Like, what exactly are you guys on about here? And they're like, well, we don't actually know what to call it. Like, we can't really call it a nut cake because it's actually not a cake. And it's on a cheese board and it's the closest thing to a soft cheese. So we're just going to use that title as much as we can because we don't actually know what to do. When it comes to the alternate nut milks in Australia, that's never been challenged ever. And I don't think it ever will be challenged. At the moment, they're starting to, dairy industry starting to say something. But like, you've had soy milks that have been there for like over 30 years, never been challenged. But the meats, like they're starting to be used, your alternate meat, those terminology is being used. And so the red meat industry is starting to say, hold on, you're stepping into our turf, you got to get your own name. And they're like, well, we don't know what to call it. And the regulators are like, well, we don't have any science to back up what we need to call it either, so we don't really know. So right now, it's basically the consumers are driving it.
But do you think that there may be the positive benefits associated with these traditional products are being a halo effect being transferred onto these alternative products? Like, is the industry right to be a little bit concerned about this?
I think in one sense, yes. I mean, when you look at, say, if a nut milk, I'll use that for an example, if it is appropriately supplemented on a nutrition information panel, if I'm looking at calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, vitamin D, and protein, it looks exactly the same, right? It may look the same. But milk has got hundreds of other compounds in it that we have not yet articulated, and it's not an NIP. And the other things don't have it. Plus, when you add a supplementary type nutrient into it, it's not a natural compound. So there's calcium and then there's calcium. You've got a particular type of calcium, I think it's carbonate, is what's commonly used in these products. And they have a bioavailability of about 30%. Whereas the calcium that is naturally present in dairy milk has a bioavailability of about 80%. So we're talking about two different calcium components here. But on a nutrition information panel to an ordinary consumer, it looks like the exact same thing. But it actually nutritionally is not the same thing.
How does someone message that out? Because we do know that as consumers, we're trying to translate complex information into everyday usable messages, which goes back to your value proposition that you've highlighted in here. How do you message it out simply so that it's understood effectively? And I know Tara spoke to that in the context of the meat and dairy facts earlier. And what are the messaging techniques?
Messaging techniques.
Big question, I know.
All right, at the end of the day, I think people want evidence. They want factual information. And if you're not playing in that space, someone else is going to play in that space, point blank. If you're not presenting factual information, you're going to have somebody else who has lost weight by drinking carrot juice for 28 days or something, and that's their claim to fame. And now they're a nutrition expert, so they're going to just be putting whatever they want into that arena. So if you're not playing in it, you're not going to play in it, point blank. It is absolutely essential. So if there's any academics in the room, you have to communicate. You do. Research is always 10 to 15 years in the future. All right, so what I presented there, that's like stuff from 2017, 2016. What researchers find in universities, in your research institutes, that information, by the time it gets to industry, it's already 10 years old. And the researchers have moved on to something else. They're 10 years into the future again. And so they think it's cool for that moment, but it takes 10 years to get to industry and another 5 years to get to consumers. So it's 15 years old by the time it gets out. So if you are doing research, if you're an industry body, if you're a company, there are researchers who are playing in your space. They've got current data, current information. You really need to interact together to present that information as a concerted front to consumers in real time, not wait 15 years, because by then it's changed and we've moved on to something else. Do you know what I mean?
I have a comment real quick, and I completely agree with you. And I really like your point about partnering with someone who can help with the messaging, because as a scientist, you're a scientist, I'm a scientist. As a scientist, a lot of times we're not real good at explaining what's happening. It's like, why can't you just figure this out? It's really easy. It's not really easy.
Yeah.
And you can't take this big complex truth and just state it and say, there it is, figure it out. So I think having that partner between science and, the communicators is very, very important.
Yeah.
But that brings us to another issue that I think plays on the minds of a lot of us, and it's these false truths, I'm going to call them, misinformation, and Commissioner Hogan mentioned that this morning, and I suppose social media has exaggerated that process of false information getting into the public discourse and being integrated into people's thinking. And Anne-Line, you mentioned there the idea of the person who went on the cabbage diet for a month and lost, or the carrot diet, wherever it was, for a month and lost loads of weight and is feeling great and alive and alert, and it was wonderful. So we have these celebrity media individuals who are communicating through their networks and social media, who are sharing misinformation that is not founded on fact. And you're saying we have to convey the factual message.
Yeah.
That segments of the population will follow because they're seeing this evidence in front of them, and they're not questioning the expertise of the communicator. So in other words, they're trusting a celebrity who hasn't got that science-based evidence, rather it's a particularly short-term experience they have.
Yeah.
How do we address that issue? Because it is false information, but it's trusted for a period of time.
Yeah.
And if you attack the communicator and say, well, they don't have the credentials, well, then that can actually create less or a bigger negative impact.
Yeah. Social media is really interesting because social media is entirely about making friends with people you don't know. Having a conversation with random people online that you have no interest and know nothing about, but you talk to them. That is, in a nutshell, what Twitter, Instagram is all about. Facebook is like my mom and dad's generation. They keep in contact with their...
That's my generation.
They keep in contact with their friends, their relatives. It's not what we do today. But Instagram, Twitter, all those sort of things, it is literally about being friends with someone. So influencers are able to be influential because they let everybody into their world. And so you are personal. So I had someone, after I did that radio show the other day, I've had a couple of trolls, but one in particular, I sometimes engage with them, not always. You'll be smart about it because you can pick and choose. And I've engaged with one of them, had a chat with them entirely on Instagram. You can see the whole post there. And at the end of it, they got to the end and they were like, well, thank you. I'm going to agree to disagree with you. I'm not going to put any more comments. But thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me and let me into your world. And it's like, That's what it's all about. So when you're on social media, what influencers are doing is they're letting people into their world and they're making friends with everyone. And when you're friends with someone, you have an emotional connection. And so they can tell you that eating a bar of soap is going to cleanse your arteries from cardiovascular disease. You will do it because they're your friend. Even though you've never met them, you don't actually know them. That's beside the point.
But you're trusting them.
I'm trusting them because they let me into my world.
Because I want to be like them, possibly.
You want to be like them, but they are allowing you to come into their living room. I mean, I did a 24-hour post on Instagram last night, and I was live, and it like got over I don't know, 2,500 hits or something in 6 hours. And I was just sitting in bed in my pajamas telling people about what I'm going to talk about today. And so that engagement is like, what? It's real, you're a real scientist, you're a real person, you're in your jammies, in a hotel, in your bed, talking about this. Like, this is friendship. I'm not friends with any of them. I don't follow a whole lot of people, but they follow me. Because
how you
it's
share.
about, like I trust Amy. I never knew Amy until yesterday, but we've spoken to each other on the phone, we've emailed each other, we've had great conversations. I didn't know her until yesterday, but I already trusted her because we've been engaging and communicating and interacting with each other. That's what social media is about. It is about creating that relationship. And when you've got that relationship, you've got trust.
Okay, so that's a big challenge, a big ask, I think.
Well, I think it's a big ask because we don't like to put ourselves out there. Like, the truth is, I am very introverted. I know it doesn't look like I'm an introverted person, but I'm doing a job, and this is me. Outside of here, I'm an introvert. But you have to do that. You have to put yourself out there, because if you don't, someone else is going to. And you don't have control over the information that they're presenting.
I'm very conscious of time, and time is moving on, and people want to get out of here ahead of traffic, and I'm quite taken aback that our 15 minutes that I said we were going to be is already up. But I just want to ask both of you very quickly one other question, and we might then just open it up to 2 or 3 very quick questions from the audience. This morning we saw, I mean, there are lots of challenges out there, but with every challenge comes opportunity. And we saw a very positive outlook in the context of new markets and new products, and an openness to that, and the discussion around diversification. So diversification in the context of moving to the Chinese market, diversification with new products that market to adjust to cultures there, but equally the idea of developing markets here. Is the Chinese market going to be similar too, or are the fundamentals of what you were speaking about, Anneline, the same as what we heard today for the markets that are well established, that we've operated in for a long period of time?
Key thing is to always understand your end user. And I'm going to probably shoot myself in the foot because I'm going to be flying Team Australia's flag, and I'm just going to, oh well, too bad, how sad. If you're going into China, you got to realize Ireland is not going to feed. Everyone talks about being the food bowl to China. You're not going to be the food bowl to China. You produce all the food you can today. You'll feed China for all of 24 hours, and then both China and you don't have food. There's too many people. It's about understanding who is that high value proposition. So are you doing the gold teaspoon to China? If you tap into that market, that top 10% of the whole population who are earning hundreds of millions of dollars, that's a very different value proposition than the 75% of the general Chinese consumer. So if you understand who that end user is, that makes a big difference. And Ireland does have something going for it. So New Zealand and Australia, we've worked that out. We cannot be the food bowl to China, even though we're right there. We just can't, because there's too many. And we can't feed ourselves or them. So if we go for that high value proposition where we're selling, you know, a 100-gram Wagyu steak for $1,000 US, that's a very unique Chinese buyer, and there's a lot of them. If you're selling Australian infant formula to China, the parents who buy that in China are very different to the general average Joe Blow Chinese parent. And so they're going to pay for brand Australia. They're going to pay for brand New Zealand. They will pay for brand Ireland, but what is brand Ireland? If it's just lean and green, you don't have anything going for you. I'm sorry. It's the truth. Even though you are the greenest place on the whole planet, there are other countries that are marketing themselves as lean and green as well. So what is it about Ireland that is unique? So currently I'm involved with a research group in Australia, and we're doing research on uniquely Australian. What does uniquely Australian mean? Because New Zealand has got the lean and green thing down pat. So what does lean and green mean to Ireland? What is uniquely Ireland is very different. And you got to understand that. What is it that sets you guys apart from all the other lean and greeners out there? Apart from the fact you actually are green and you got a whole lot of rain to prove it, but what is it that sets you apart? And they'll buy that. But you just got to understand who is that end user. So I've presented you the Irish consumer, and I haven't even broken them down into categories. This is just general, but who your end Chinese or your end Asian user is. The Japanese are different to the Chinese.
Okay. And Tiffany, in the context of the States?
There's tremendous opportunity in China, which we have yet to take advantage of for various reasons, and most of you know the largest one. We talked about what was it? Incorrect messaging. Yeah. Anyway, you know, I think we in the United States, and I'm going to talk about beef first. We have a different perspective on getting beef into China. You know, we recently got beef into China after, 13 years. We did not put beef into China for 13 years, and that's because of BSE way long time ago. So we recently got into China. However, we have very, very strict standards that beef has to meet. Now, we have picked our end user, and our end user is, you know, the higher end, the more affluent Chinese people. But we have not picked that by choice, I'd say. We picked that because they require a full traceability program, which you all know in the United States we do not have. They also require basically non-hormone treated cattle, just like the EU. And we don't usually produce that kind of beef. I mean, we have channels that we produce, through which we produce it. Obviously, we bring beef into Europe. But it's a very, very niche market. And we do the opposite of what the Irish would do. We don't market the grass-fed to China. We market that grain-fed. We market that white marbling, the juiciness, the tenderness. And it's a great market. However, we'd really like to expand, and we'd like our end user to be the general population. The current restrictions don't allow that yet, but we are trying to do that. When we move to pork, that's where our big opportunity is, and I think that's where the world's opportunity is. There's no way that we're going to replace the pork that's gone from African swine fever at this point, but we'd like to at least attempt to, give it a shot. We're not going to replace it, but we'd like to supplement. The problem that we have there is restrictions. So really, I think we have a great opportunity with China, and I think we understand, which commodities fit with which consumers. Right now, our problem is we just can't get it over there because of other barriers.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I want to just very briefly, we have, if we have one or two, we'll keep it to 2 questions. Anyone in the audience? I'm sure there must be some burning questions there.
Everyone's ready to go home.
Oh, there's one over here, yes? We might even leave it to one, seeing as there's only one, and maybe there's only one burning question at this point. We've done very well at answering all of the questions.
Tommy Conway from Investec. Tiffany, it's a question for you, and it's relating to your veterinary side, I guess. You referenced the African swine fever effect in China right now and how it's affecting the market. How long do you think that's going to persist? And, what are the big picture implications of it that we should be thinking about?
This is really a tough question, but I get it all the time. So I've been over to China a few times. I was there in May, and they were really kind of in the midst of the outbreaks. Um, you have conversations and you have things that you hear, and those things are very, very different. The government, the Chinese government at this point, or I'm sorry, at the point I was there in May, said that they had lost 20 to 25% of their sow herd. They didn't have numbers on market pigs. I doubt they had lost that much at that point. The numbers we're hearing now are more like 50% of the herd. And with the lack of federal restrictions, they're leaving they're leaving everything up to the provinces, which we would do the same thing in the United States. However, I think our states operate differently than their provinces. The federal government has not done a lot, and personally, after I was over there, I really think it's going to be like FMD, and I think it's going to be endemic. I don't think it's going to go away. I really don't. Now, I think that means a huge change for their industry. I think they're going to have to move from the more backyard farms to more, of the biosecure facilities like we have in the States. But it's going to take a long, long time. That's a lot of infrastructure, But I don't think it's going to go away.
We have one more, a very short question because we are well over time. We have to stop. We have to stop at this stage. I'm very conscious that we're gone.
Thank you, Chairperson. We seem to be targeting to remove our beef industry from this country and replace it with beef from South America. Now, looking at that all due to climate and price, do you think that we can get the price and ignore the climate effect of transporting our product to China? Do you think we can get enough business to replace what we have at the moment?
It depends on, I think like Annaline said, I think it depends on who you target. You're going to have to do a strategic targeting, and it's really going to have to be kind of a new initiative as well, because grass-fed is not something that's, that the Chinese are like, oh yes, please give me that. Now, if you took grass-fed beef to the United States, don't do that, please. No, just kidding. If you took it to the United States, you'd have a great consumer base. You really would. In China, I'm not sure that you would have that yet. However, I think their society is moving toward that end goal. I mean, we see it in Beijing. They've tried to reduce emissions over the last 5-10 years. They're starting to think about these social issues, and I think grass-fed beef would come into play there. And so I think eventually, if you pick the right consumer and you marketed it correctly, I think you definitely would have a market. You'd have a hole to fill.
Yeah.
It's going to take time, though.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's about understanding who it is that you're after in that Chinese market. I know from our Nook of the Woods, we get heaps of Asian students coming out to Australia to study. And they see the Australian lifestyle, they experience Australian food, they get used to Australian flavors, and then they head back home. Like these kids to come out to Australia, they're really, really wealthy families. And then they head back home and they want that over there. So Daigos are a big thing in Australia. There's Daigo shops, Daigos are everywhere. Do you know what Daigo is? Oh, sorry. So Daigos are Asians. That's all they are. They're Asians who buy local Australian products and they post it back home to China. And they have online shops on eBay, on WhatsApp, and they're selling Australian products to China from Australia. So they keep Australia posting a job. So they are called Daigos, and they love Australian products. So baby formula has a cap on it. You can only buy 6 tins of formula or 4 tins, because the Daigos come in and they literally clear out the whole shelf and then ship it off to China. So that's what we've got over there. We've got a big impact of that happening over there. So they're going off to China, going back home, showing all the pictures of what they have in Australia, and it's on social media in China. And so the high income consumers in China want Australian or New Zealand products, but they want Australian or New Zealand branded products. So what we have for sale in Australia, they want it over there. So the Daigos buy it, and they earn hundreds of thousands of dollars. These are uni kids who are doing it, just being a Daigo. And so they're getting a feel for Australian food. So Australian branded products are going straight into China, but they're targeting that consumer group. So it's really important to understand who is that end user. I think Ireland can definitely do that. Ireland has got an amazing story. You guys are like so close to your cows. There's like 17 cows in someone's back paddock. Like you're close to it. You could really do that.
I think we'd better stop here on that very positive note. I think it's highlighting opportunities because we also have many Chinese in our universities and institutions here in Ireland, and that narrative will develop over time with regard to experiences here. So thank you very much, and I think we can speak to opportunities.